In all of this, we really see the King of the South pushing hard against the papacy, really driving in that wound from 1798, thus weakening him. The King of the South pushed hard against the King of the North and then put up a wall to keep him out. Alright, hello there and welcome to another video by Zion's Watchman Media. And we are now on the final video in our study on Daniel chapter 11. So I hope that you're ready for this one. It's going to be jam-packed, but it's really good. So I hope that you have your Bibles ready. I have my Bible right here. I'm going to have the verses on the screen as well if you want to follow along that way, but a Bible in hand would be good. So let us begin with Daniel chapter 11, and I've called this the final conflict. Now, where did we leave off last time on Daniel 11? We left off at verse 35, and up until then we were looking at how the papacy had ruled for 1260 years, and we saw even the Protestant Reformation take scene towards the end of that. But now we are going to go further into Daniel chapter 11, and we're going to pick up on verse 36. It says this, "And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done." Alright, so who is the king that is being spoken of here? It is speaking of the king of the north, or Rome. Now, some of you may be saying right now, how can this king here be Rome? I thought the king of the north was Syria. Well, Rome conquered Syria in 65 BC, and from that point, Rome became the king of the north. And the king of the north remains Rome in both of Rome's phases, both its pagan phase, or the Roman Empire, and its papal phase, the Roman Church. Now, let us continue. Alright, so we want to be sure that papal Rome, or the papacy, at the end of time is the king of the north. So here I have this verse on Daniel chapter 11:36, describing the king of the north, and below I have these verses describing the papacy. So we're going to compare. Verse 36 said that he shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. So he is a power that exalts himself, this king. Now, does the papacy match this? We have in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, speaking of the papacy, "Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sitteth in the temple of God, shewing himself that he is God." So that sounds pretty close to me. Daniel chapter 8 verse 25, speaking of the papacy again, "And through his policy he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart." Alright, so here we see a similarity. Both powers, the king of the north and the papacy, they both exalt themselves and they magnify themselves. So they are in harmony on those points. Let us continue. It also says of him that he shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. And of the papacy we read in Revelation 13 verse 6, "And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven." Okay? And in Daniel chapter 7 verse 25, it says this, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High," speaking of the papacy. So both powers speak great things against God. "And he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished." Daniel 8 verse 25, again the papacy, "And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered." So both powers prosper for a time. These verses here make it very clear that the papacy is the king of the north at the end of time. Now let us keep going. Speaking of the king of the north, it says this, "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all." Alright, so there's a little bit in this verse. We're going to take it in parts here. Now, what does this first part mean? Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Well, you see, the early church fathers, the apostolic church, actually regarded the commandments of God and actually respected God. But the papacy does not do this. You see, the papacy does not respect the commandments of God. It does not respect God, and it has placed its traditions above the word of God and has made a new way of salvation instead of the way that is written out in the Bible. Nor does he have the desire of women. Okay, well, this is clearly seen in the papacy. The priesthood is forbidden to marry. They're celibate. They're not allowed to have a regard for women. Nor shall he regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. Again, this verse is just telling us that the papacy has exalted itself above every other religion, above every god. Let us go forward. Verse 38. But in his estate he shall honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things. All right, so this verse is telling us that he is going to honor the God of forces, or the compelling of the conscience, forcing one's conscience. That is what the papacy honors here. Now, God's way is the complete opposite. God respects the freedom of choice. He tells us in the book of Joshua, actually, choose you this day whom ye shall serve. He gives us the power of choice because God's government is based on love, not force. Now, if we go further in this verse, it says this, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. This can be referring to the idol worship that is done in the Catholic Church or the worship of Mary that is seen. And here we have some pictures of Pope Francis and Mary right here as well, giving homage to Mary. And as the verse said, the gold, silver, precious stones, and pleasant things have been spent on these idols here. Huge amounts of wealth. Continuing. Verse 39. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. All right, so once again, there's a lot in this verse, so let's take it bit by bit. It says that he shall do so in the strongholds with a strange God. What does this mean? Well, the strongholds are like the head or the headquarters. So at the top levels of Catholicism, this worship is being practiced. And the strange God that is spoken of can be speaking of these relics or Mary or the saints in the Catholic Church. And it says that he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. Again, much glory and wealth has been spent on these idols. And he shall cause them to rule over many. This can be referring to the fact that those in Catholicism are held in bondage to these idols and must give homage to them or must submit to them. And the verse also said that he shall divide the land for gain. Here we see the papacy's claim to universal dominion. She is the one who decides the territories or the countries of this world. And it says that she does this for gain. In other words, she divides the countries of this world for a price. The papacy has supported dictators and rulers of our world in their rise as long as they gain something in the end. Let us look at verse 40. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. So we're going to look at this first part here. At the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. What does this mean? Well, I have something written here. At the time of the end, the king of the south, or Egypt, would push at the papacy. The word push here is fascinating, for it comes from the Hebrew word nagash and can mean to push, thrust, or gore. This gives us a picture of a violent attack or a deadly wound. And it's a direct parallel to Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 to 3. All right, now some of you may be wondering right now, well, how did Egypt or the king of the south push at the papacy in 1798? We don't really see that historically. Well, we're going to find out the answer, and it's given to us in Revelation chapter 11. Let us look at it. And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And when they shall have finished or are finishing their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified, and they of the people, and kindreds, and tongues, and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. Now, we don't have a lot of time to go into a full study on Revelation chapter 11, so I'm just going to give you a clear overview of what this is saying. There are these two witnesses here that would be attacked from a power from beneath, and these two witnesses represent the scriptures. And it is said of this power that it comes from the bottomless pit to make war against them, and that it shall overcome them and kill them. And this power is called spiritually Egypt. And this power would attack the scriptures for 3.5 prophetic days, or 3.5 years. So according to Revelation chapter 11, the scriptures would be attacked for 3.5 days or years by spiritual Egypt. Now, a question that we want to ask ourselves is, why is this power at the end of time that attacks the scriptures compared to Egypt? Well, we read the answer in the book called The Great Controversy, which says, "Of all nations presented in Bible history, Egypt most boldly denied the existence of the living God and resisted his commands. No monarch ever ventured upon more open and high-handed rebellion against the authority of heaven than did the king of Egypt. When the message was brought him by Moses in the name of the Lord, Pharaoh proudly answered, 'Who is Jehovah that I should hearken unto his voice to let Israel go? I know not Jehovah, and moreover I will not let Israel go.' This is atheism, and the nation represented by Egypt would give voice to a similar denial of the claims of the living God and would manifest a like spirit of unbelief and defiance." So just as the original Egypt possessed the spirit of atheism and defiance against God, so this spiritual Egypt around the time of the end would exhibit these same characteristics. Now, what power is this? This power can be none other than atheistic France during the French Revolution. So here we have a picture of atheistic France during the Revolution. During this time, the Bible was banned, churches were closed down, and God was completely rejected by the nation. The nation embraced atheism, and they worshiped the God of reason. And it was from November 1793 to June 1797 that this hostility towards the scriptures was seen. So just as the Bible said, for 3.5 years, the scriptures would be attacked. Here we have a picture of the goddess of reason right here. And we have on this side right here the famous Voltaire, who spoke very offensive things towards God. All right, so now that we know that atheistic France at the time of the end represents spiritual Egypt, we need to ask ourselves, did this country ever push hard against the papacy and gore and really wound it? Did it ever give it a deadly blow? The answer is yes, it did. In the year 1798, a deadly wound was given. France sent its general Berthier into Rome and took the Pope captive, and this was Pope Pius VI, and he would die later in captivity a year later. France gave the deadly blow. Now, what we need to realize here, though, also is that the King of the South, or spiritual Egypt, doesn't just represent atheistic France at the time of the end. It represents all of the countries of our world that would possess this atheistic spirit of Egypt. And the King of the South would live on through communism as time would progress. For in 1848, Karl Marx published the Communist Manifesto, which promotes atheism. And in 1917, we had the Russian Revolution under Vladimir Lenin, and he started the Communist International Organization. In 1922, we had the Communist Soviet Union founded, who was later controlled by Joseph Stalin. In 1945, we had the Eastern European countries under the Communist Soviet Union's control. This was known as the Iron Curtain. And we see the Eastern countries right here. And in 1961, we saw the Berlin Wall go up to keep Western influences and religion out of communist Europe. In all of this, we really see the King of the South pushing hard against the papacy, really driving in that wound from 1798, thus weakening him. The King of the South pushed hard against the King of the North and then put up a wall to keep him out. Now, the King of the North wouldn't just sit back and allow all of this to happen, for we read, "And the King of the North shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships, and shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over." So the King of the North would come at him like a whirlwind or like a storm. and this will be done with chariots and horsemen, which according to 2 Kings and Proverbs are a symbol of military strength. And he would also come at him with many ships. Ships in the Bible are a symbol of economic power, according to these verses right here. So to fight against communism, the papacy would have to receive arms or military strength, just like it did with Clovis, the king of the Franks, in 508. But this time, the papacy combined itself with the superpower of our world, the United States of America. And in 1922, Times Magazine published an article on this union and called it the Holy Alliance. And I'll put the link in the description for you. And we see it right here. And this alliance was made with two individuals, President Ronald Reagan and John Paul II. And these two would go against communism and bring about its downfall. And I have a little timeline here. And it was in 1987 that President Reagan gave his Brandenburg speech in Berlin, where he said to the Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," a reference to the Berlin Wall. Shortly after this, in 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down, and then in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Here we have a picture of this, the Berlin Wall coming down, and then we have Mr. Gorbachev with the shattered Soviet Union. And when the communist Soviet Union collapsed, we had nations under the Iron Curtain, or the Soviets' control, freed. So here we have the Soviet Union collapsed right here, and then all of the different powers jumping out and getting free. Because of this, Europe has never been the same, and the papacy has now placed itself back into Eastern Europe. Continuing. Speaking of the papacy, he shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief children of Ammon. Now this is very interesting because this word countries was not in the original. It was added in by the translators. So this can actually be read. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many shall be overthrown. Now we know that the glorious land represented Judea, or Israel. But seeing that after 34 AD, after the stoning of Stephen, Israel is no longer God's chosen nation, this glorious land must represent God's remnant church at the end of time. And the verse said that many are going to be overthrown. This has slowly been done by the king of the north by bringing in slowly different evangelical ideas and new forms of worship. But what is the way in which the majority are going to be overcome? This is going to be when the papacy, alongside the United States of America, enforces the mark of the beast, or forced Sunday worship, to replace the Bible Sabbath. This is how the many are going to be overthrown. And we have a few statements here from the Spirit of Prophecy which say, Sunday keeping is not yet the mark of the beast, and will not be until the decree goes forth causing men to worship this idle Sabbath. The time will come when this day will be the test, but that time has not come yet. Manuscripts 118, 1899. So the test is not here yet, but it's coming. Now the question that we want to ask ourselves is, why are the many overthrown? The answer is found in the Great Controversy, page 608. As the storm approaches, a large class who have professed faith in the third angel's message, but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth, abandon their position and join the ranks of the opposition. By uniting with the world and partaking of its spirit, they have come to view matters in nearly the same light, and when the test is brought, they are prepared to choose the easy, popular side. Men of talent and pleasing address, who once rejoiced in the truth, employ their powers to deceive and mislead souls. They become the most bitter enemies of their former brethren. When Sabbath keepers are brought before the courts to answer for their faith, these apostates are the most efficient agents of Satan to misrepresent and accuse them, and by false reports and insinuations to stir up the rulers against them. So, what is the reason that the many are going to be overcome? It is because they have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth. Brothers and sisters, I hope that you've caught this. A theoretical knowledge of the truth is not going to save any of us. We can go to church, we can go to Bible school, we can go to Sabbath school, anything. But unless we have been converted in our hearts and we are living out the truths that we know, it will do us no good. We must be converted and we must live a new life in Christ. May we surrender our lives to Christ now fully. Now the second part of verse 41. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief children of Ammon. And I have something written here. The nations of Edom, Moab, and Ammon were related to Israel through Abraham, but later fell into idolatry. At the end of time, these represent those who are still in the fallen apostate churches. They are related to Israel, but have fallen off from the truth. They will hear the loud cry message of Revelation 18, accept the true Sabbath, and join God's true remnant people. Verse 42, He, the Papacy, shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. The Papacy is going to exert its power over all of the countries of our world, and Egypt specifically is not going to escape. These communist atheist nations are going to be brought under Rome's control. Spiritual Egypt constitutes the 5 communist countries of our world today. These are China, Cuba, Laos, North Korea, and Vietnam. These will eventually fall to Rome. Therefore, it is very important that we get the message out to these countries before it is too late. Here I have a picture here of these nations. Verse 43, But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. So what does this mean? When spiritual Egypt is conquered, the papacy will receive the wealth of communism or these communist nations. This is a direct parallel to the historical battle of Actium in 31 BC, when Rome, after defeating literal Egypt, returned to his land with great riches. Daniel 11 verse 28. Also, there's another point. Rome having the power over the treasures of gold and silver can also be a reference to the fact that when the mark of the beast or Sunday worship is enacted, no one is going to be able to buy or sell unless they receive it. Now the verse also mentions the Libyans and the Ethiopians. This is very fascinating, so please pay attention. It says this, And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps, or they shall submit to him. Now, who are the Libyans and the Ethiopians? We have a few verses here. So in Ezekiel 38 verse 5, we read, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. So the Ethiopians and the Libyans have the shield and helmet. These are used for military purposes. And in Ezekiel 30 verses 5 to 8, we read, And the sword shall come upon Egypt, and great pain shall be in Ethiopia, when the slain shall fall in Egypt, Ethiopia and Libya, and Lydia, and all the mingled people, and Chub, and the men of the land that is in league shall fall with them by the sword. Thus saith the Lord, They also that uphold Egypt shall fall, and the pride of her power shall come down. From the tower of Sin shall they fall in it by the sword, saith the Lord God. And they shall know that I am the Lord, when I have set a fire in Egypt, and when all her helpers shall be destroyed. So from these verses, it seems like the Libyans and the Ethiopians are the supporters of Egypt. They have the shield and the helmet. They defend her. Now there's a very fascinating parallel in all of this with Mark Antony, who was Egypt's leader in the Battle of Actium between Egypt and Rome. And I have written right here, after the Battle of Actium, the Egyptian general Mark Antony retreated and sought help from his forces in Libya under his general Scarpus, but these forces abandoned him and joined the side of Rome. So this is the end time application that we can look for. At the end of time, we can expect the countries that have supported the communist nations or the King of the South to abandon them when they see that communism is almost defeated, and we can expect these supporting countries to join the side of Rome. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. So from the east and from the north tidings come, a message that disturbs the papacy. Now geographically we know that Ethiopia was in the south, and Libya was in the west, and Judea, where God's people dwelt, was in the east and north. Therefore this message that comes from the east and north must come from spiritual Israel at the end of time. It comes from God's remnant church. And this is the sealing message of Revelation chapter 7. Let us look at it here. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the four winds, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their forehead. So this is a sealing message sent by this angel. Now, a question that we need to ask ourselves is, well, what is the seal of God? What is the seal that this angel is trying to put in the foreheads of God's people? We read here in Ezekiel, moreover, also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them. Verse 20, and hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that ye may know that I am the Lord your God. The seal of God, or the sign of God, is the Sabbath, and the Sabbath is a symbol of righteousness by faith. The message of righteousness by faith is the message that goes forth at the end of time that troubles and infuriates the papacy. And when this message is preached, many now who are in Rome are going to embrace it and join the side of God's true remnant people. Let us continue though. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. This message is going to enrage the papacy, and they are going to try to destroy anyone who is embracing it and anyone who is teaching it. Verse 45, last verse. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Now this word "end" is very interesting because it is not in the original. This can actually be read. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So the papacy is going to place itself between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. And this is going to be done through the National Sunday Law, the final test. Now let us see what the sea, or the waters, represent. Well, according to Revelation chapter 17, verse 15, they represent peoples and multitudes, nations, and tongues. So a lot of people on planet Earth, the majority. But what about this glorious holy mountain? Well, we know that the glorious land was Judea, so this glorious holy mountain must be a holy mountain in Judea. And I have a few verses here that we can look at. So Psalms 2 verse 6 says, Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill, or mountain of Zion. Psalms 48, 1-2. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness, beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth, is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. These verses make it very clear that Mount Zion is the glorious holy mountain. Now, what is Mount Zion though? Well, we read right here in Psalms 125, verse 1, They that trust in the Lord shall be as Mount Zion, which cannot be removed, but abideth forever. Mount Zion, or the glorious holy mountain, is the small faithful remnant that has not fallen away. They are sealed and cannot be moved from the truth. They are the ones who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. So bringing this all together, the papacy at the end of time plants itself in between the sea, the world, and the glorious holy mountain, the faithful remnant still standing. There will only be two sides. What side do you want to stand on now? I pray that you will surrender your lives to Jesus once more. And we have written here, the fact that only Mount Zion remains standing in the glorious land to resist the papacy shows that a large number, if not the majority in the church, have already been overcome by the papacy. Sunday observance will be the great divider. Thankfully, though, the papacy does not win, for we read, Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. God's people are going to be rescued, but we're going to look at that more in our next video on Daniel, in Daniel chapter 12, so don't miss that one. But up until then, I hope that you realize that we are now at the end of the line in prophecy, and now is the time to be sure more than ever that we are right with God. May we surrender our lives to him every single day of our life. Now, I hope that you've learned a lot in these videos on Daniel chapter 11. I know it's a lot of information, but it really shows us where we are in the stream of time in prophecy. God truly answered Daniel's prayer when he asked for more insight into the 2300-day prophecy. For Daniel 11 goes very deeply into the 2300-day prophecy and gives us more details even beyond it. Alright, now if you like this video and you want to learn more, be sure to subscribe below, click on the bell, and we will see you in the next one. Until next time.